Hello and welcome to the 2019 Locked On Jazz Free Agency Live Show. Exclusively here on all of the various different platforms for you. Instagram coming your direction. Chat room open on the Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch channels for you. So thank you very much for everyone for tuning in live to this event. We'll keep you up to date and monitored. Let's look at where the Jazz sit right now, what's taking place with that, as well as news continues to break and come in, and we'll update you on all of those things. Here's where the Jazz sit right now. I really think there's two scenarios we're going to see play out here for the Jazz, and they've put themselves really in a pretty great situation by getting that reportedly getting the Conley deal done. It's not official, obviously, but there's all sorts of semantics here that we have to be careful with, and such. But there is not any official news that deal's done, but obviously it's been reported numerous times. So by doing that, the Jazz have solved their first thing, which is where their point guard situation and Mike Conley, all reports are, will be the future of the team at the point guard position. What's the question is whether the Jazz are going to make a dramatic change to who they are as a basketball team and become small and playmaking at every position, and do that by signing Bojan Bogdanovic, who is as much a wing as he is a four. He's very good with the basketball, able to play a pick and roll game, good shooter, comes off picks very well, averaged about 20 points a game after Oladipo went out. He would really give the Jazz another scorer, another threat. Talk about kind of changing who the Jazz are, how they rebound and some things like that would be a large question. The other scenario is the Jazz go right back to Derek Favors. They go back to being the elite defensive basketball team they are. They have to go find a four somewhere out there on the market, and they bring Favors back without Jay Crowder. George Niang gets a bunch of time, and they try to find some other pieces and continue to probably investigate whether or not you end up with a Kevin Love deal or something of that sort in the process. So over time, that's where the Jazz sit right now. Both scenarios are pretty good. Credit to the front office. They acted early. According to all reports, they got the Conley deal done. And where that leaves them right now is one of these two scenarios taking place. And with both of those scenarios changing who the Jazz are quite considerably, but giving them really good opportunities and putting them in the top side of the Western Conference the way things are. All right, let me get to your questions and those things, but let me update you for those of you who are not following Twitter by the minute. Kevin Durant reportedly will be heading to the Brooklyn Nets with Kyrie Irving, DeAndre Jordan, and then I think actually a nice subtle signing there, Garrett Temple, who's a player I like a little bit, to the Nets. Kemba is going to Boston. Terry Rozier in a sign-and-trade is going to Charlotte on a massive deal, a 3-year, $58 million deal, which is much more than probably his value and what he's going to bring back to them. And we'll see what that does for them in that regard. It also seems as though Boston is working on a sign-and-trade right now to be able to bring back Al Horford or have other flexibilities or a major trade exception. So Boston's really working the system right now to come up with the most creative way to get that done. Tobias Harris is meeting in minutes with the Philadelphia 76ers looking for a max 5-year deal. Jimmy Butler is meeting with Miami right now, saying that's his preferred destination. I think he's just trying to get a deal and get money, and his agent did not play the situation very well in Minnesota, so I'm not sure I have great confidence that he's playing this particularly well right now. Harrison Barnes, 4-year, $85 million in Sacramento, feels like an awful lot. Dwayne Dedmon, 3-year, $40 million in Sacramento. It's a nice player. It'll be a bigger role for him than he's had before, but again, we'll see how much that moves the meter. Brook Lopez is staying in Milwaukee at a 4-year, $52 million deal for them. Rudy Gay, 2-year, $32 million deal staying in San Antonio. Chris Middleton, 5-year, $178 million deal in Milwaukee. Nikola Mirotic has gone to Europe. So quick thoughts on all of this. The first thing I'd point out, I actually think the Warriors dodged a huge bullet today. I really do. the Warriors were on the verge of signing 5-year contracts to Kevin Durant and Klay Thompson, both with significant injuries, and Kevin Durant's not going to be the same player he was. The fact that they didn't just sign both those guys, I actually think is a bonus to Golden State. The West is now wide open. Kawhi Leonard is the one that we're waiting to hear from and see what he's going to do. Chris Broussard has tweeted out the news that he's the Lakers to lose, so that would get certainly interesting. If you have Kawhi Leonard, Anthony Davis, and LeBron James on the same team, that would certainly be the favorite in the NBA. All right, let me get to some of your questions. We'll continue. It seems though the news has slowed down a little bit right now. Kind of the initial run has run out. Pretty cool. We've got well over 1,000 people watching this right now, so thank you very much to everybody. And I can't imagine. I'm kind of blown away by that number. So let me kind of try to pull through some of the questions that have come in on the various things so far. All right, so let me set up this. It is probably either Bojan or Favors. There's not a scenario where you can bring back both, and the Jazz just have to make a decision of what they think is the right approach for them as an organization and where they want to go with that. And it changes who they are dramatically. I mean, that's the big thing. They've been this clogged up team without a lot of space. You bring in Bojan, and you've suddenly opened it up. All 4 guys can run the pick and roll or starting for you, and you've got all sorts of things taking place in that regard that changes who the Jazz are. It really gets them, Quinn Snyder with 4 guys playing the pick and roll from an offensive standpoint gets pretty amazing. And then you're really taxing this guy, Rudy Gobert, the defensive player of the year. You're saying without a lot of help, you're going to anchor our defense. We're going to switch 1 through 4. And if you're playing with your 5, you're running into Rudy. And that would be the approach the Jazz had with Bojan. With Favors, you're coming back to a very similar offensive structure than what you've had, which has had its problems, but defensively is brilliant. All right, let's kind of run down. If we sign Bojan, who's our backup bigs, and how is our depth chart going to fill out? I mean, this is what happens when you start to sign up big-time free agents and pay $40 million to various guys, or $30 million to 2 guys. You start to lose depth, and so you try to go find. The Jazz would try to find a backup center to fill that 16 minutes a night that Favors has filled him, and there's a bunch of guys out there. Is Robin Lopez available? Does he get signed to a bunch of money somewhere in the process? Does Ed Davis get released from Brooklyn now? Does he want to go back there? Mike Muscala is a possibility, depending what happens with him. Kyle O'Quinn, Noah Vonleh was in New York, Kem Birch, Ivan Rabb, Rashawn Holmes. Those kind of players suddenly become your backup center at 12 minutes a night that you're trying to figure out a way to get going. I heard George Hill is interested in coming back as a backup role to Conley. I had not heard that. I think he wants money. That would be a minimum signing and I'm not sure that George Hill is ready. I do not believe the Jazz have the mid-level exception, depending on how they use their numbers here. It will be difficult for them to be able to get a mid-level exception deal for them. Wow, comments are coming in 1,000,000 miles an hour, so let me just try to get to all of them. Rashawn Holmes, Brooke Wright says, I like him here. I think he's just a decent backup big who's really bouncy, that could play a similar role and do things, and that's what you're not looking for a great player. You'd also like to hope Tony Bradley can give you some minutes at some point, because if he can't, then you probably have to move on from that. Sorry, there is a lot of stuff. Frank Kaminsky, I tweeted out last night. Not a great player, but if he's coming in at a low level, a minimum salary guy, he's actually got some offensive skills. He's not very good defensively. You could use him. I think there's going to be some real finds when all the money is spent. Who are the guys that are going to come in at the lower numbers in this process? And I think that's going to be leading to a lot of it. All right, I'm so far behind on the chat. I'm just going to try to pick up the chat as it goes. Tobias would be better than Bojan, says Crazy Bond. Well, you know what? I actually love Tobias. I kind of agree with that. I love 3s and 4s that can play the pick and roll, so I like both these guys. But Tobias is meeting with Philadelphia right now for a 5-year max deal. He may not have been a possibility. Kemba may not have been a possibility going to Boston, and we never would have been able to clear, what the Jazz were able to do with Conley and still have Favors as a possibility here is just a better answer than what they had on a lot of these things. The Warriors could land D'Angelo Russell in a sign and trade deal that sends Kevin Durant to the Nets. That is being talked about right now. Is it possible we get Indy to do a sign and trade involving that would involve Ricky Rubio, a double sign and trade? That gets tricky, but other teams are doing things and there's a benefit to it. You never know. Ricky Rubio supposedly is going to sign in Indiana. Over on the Instagram, but what about Boban as a backup 5? Will be interesting to see where he ends up. I mean, these are there's so much money out there right now. Some of these guys are going to start falling, and that's where you fill in your backup point guard. That's where you fill in your backup center. And then you've got to find some mid-level wing depth on this team. On things. Bojan is a long shot, says DeMar Q44. I think it might be. I mean, Indiana can just keep taking that number up as far as they want. And we've got limits on what we can spend. So you're going to have to sell Bojan that this is a better choice and a better place to be, and see whether or not you can get him to buy into that. And whether he'd rather play with a more modern offense of Quinn Snyder than what Nate McMillan runs. Julius Randle, somebody's asking me about it. I think he's going to get paid. New York doesn't have a lot of options right now as they've fallen out flat on their face again. So we'll see what happens, whether he ends up there. We'll see. Can Epe sign at the vet minimum? Epe could probably. There was some talk about him going back to Europe. I don't know what's happened with that. Epe, on his locker clear out, seemed to kind of think that there was time for him to go get paid and get some more money and get some more opportunity. So we'll see on whether or not he's actually interested in coming back in a third center role. I think he would like to go get a second role center. I keep getting asked about the mid-level exception. My understanding is we will not have the mid-level exception. Depending if you're acting as a team that's under the cap to get some of these deals done, then you cannot go sign the middle-level exception unless we're acting as a team that's over the cap the whole time, and it's not clear what is taking place with that. But if we're acting as a team that's under the cap to get the Conley deal done, then we're not going to be able to. Then we would not be able to get that deal. When do we see a Mike Conley press conference? Probably that deal, if official, as reported, gets done probably somewhere around July 6th or something of that sort. Though a lot of Jazz people will be in Vegas at that point, so I'm not sure how they will do that. It's a little bit of a tricky one for the media and the team. We're actually 2 minutes away from free agency actually starting here. It obviously has gotten going a lot faster than that. The room level exception is what we would have instead. That's about $4.7 million on some of these players. You can divide it up against multiple players. What do you see with the Jazz get? Who gets us over the hump to contend for the trophy? Well, I mean, if we're able to be an elite level defensive team just simply because of Rudy Gobert, like I believe, and the Jazz are able to get another offensive player, like is being talked about with the discussion with Bojan Bogdanovic, Jazz are reportedly meeting with him any minute now, then it's an interesting concept of how good the Jazz will be. It also depends, if Kawhi Leonard goes to L.A. and Anthony Davis, LeBron James, and Kawhi are on the same team, I think that's going to be difficult. What's the word on Neto, a lot of people are asking. How will Neto, the way I understand, to get the Conley deal done under the cap, we'll have to release Neto, and then I don't know what the rule is on whether we can bring him back or not. But, he's a good example, right? He's not quite been able to stay healthy long enough to be a backup point guard. He's working hard. There was a nice article about how hard he's working on his body this year. But if he's a minimum level guy, he's a good player. Those are guys you can get at the minimum if you do your research. Shabazz Napier is a perfectly fine backup point guard. I really think Donovan's still going to play 12 or 13 minutes a night as a backup point guard. Whether you can get I even like Jaren Grant, who got released by Orlando because he could play next to Donovan as a big, long, and help him out defensively. J.J. Redick has agreed to a 2-year deal to join the New Orleans Pelicans at $26.5 million. So Redick, 2-year deal, $26.5 to join the New Orleans Pelicans coming across right now. Free agency has officially started. Kemba Walker has agreed to sign a 4-year, $141 million deal with the Boston Celtics. So that deal now official. Kevin Durant is heading. Thaddeus Young has reached an agreement with the Chicago Bulls on a 3-year, $41 million deal. That initially, I would say, is not a good sign for the Jazz in getting Bojan Bogdanovic, because that's money off Indiana. They signed C.J. Warren, so maybe they weren't planning to. So the Jazz are now just going to have to get Bojan Bogdanovic to decide he wants to come to Utah instead of going back to Indiana where he knows. Chris Middleton, 5-year, $178 million deal. Signed with the Milwaukee Bucks. Harrison Barnes, 4-year, $85 million deal, signed with the Sacramento Kings. This is incredible. We have over 1,500 people watching this right now. I can't thank you guys enough for tuning into this and being it. The phone is blowing up right now. We'll try to keep you up to date, and I'll keep the chat room is rolling right now, and I will keep following up on all those comments and things as they come in on the chat room. Derrick Rose has signed a 2-year, $15 million deal with the Detroit Pistons. So Young signs with the Bulls, Redick with the Pelicans, Derrick Rose with the Pistons on a 2-year, $15 million deal. So Tobias Harris is in Philadelphia meeting right now. We'll see what happens with that. I don't think I'll be breaking any stories today, but I thought I'd just check and make sure I hadn't been notified on anything. I'll react to other people's stories instead. Jonas Valanciunas has signed a deal with the Memphis Grizzlies, a 3-year, $45 million deal. So Valanciunas as a center, 3-year, $45. He and Dedmon get paid about the same, and he will stay in Memphis. Remember, they acquired him in the deal for Marc Gasol. Is this the year Utah should go into the luxury tax to try to win a championship? Does it make sense? The Jazz have been willing to do it. They've done it before. And so, it's a question, I think, more of whether they actually have the freedom to be able to do it with the constraints of how they're functioning rather than whether or not they go into the luxury tax. I think the luxury tax day comes when they sign Donovan along the way. Pelicans might be half decent. Drew Holiday, J.J. Redick, Zion Williamson. That's a pretty darn good team here all of a sudden. It's coming at you. We'll see who they end up with as their center in this process to see what everybody thinks of that. So that's, seeing whether the Clippers come out with anything here? Do the Lakers come out with anything here? The Western Conference loading up in this new era without the Golden State Warriors as the dominant team. I'm a little surprised by the Bulls. Markkanen, they already have Markkanen. They already have Carter. They add Young. I always wonder what they're doing with Zach LaVine. They just seem to be accumulating young. I don't see the vision of where that one is heading. Gerald Green's returning to Houston on a 1-year deal, coming across here on the more minor things. But from a Jazz standpoint, sitting here 3 minutes into free agency, reports are they're meeting with Bojan Bogdanovic. Indiana now should have more money. The 3-year, $41 million deal for Thaddeus Young, T.J. Warren, who they signed or they traded from Phoenix to become their 4. Bogdanovic would play kind of their 3-4 match. Kristaps Porzingis has signed a 5-year, $158 million deal with the Dallas Mavericks. So Kevin Durant makes it official. He's a net. So is Kyrie Irving. So is DeAndre Jordan. So is Garrett Temple on all of that. Kemba's going to Boston. Tobias Harris is currently meeting with the Philadelphia 76ers right now. I'm just running down to update you all of the news. Harrison Barnes, a 4-year, $85 million deal in Sacramento. Brook Lopez stays in Milwaukee on a 4-year, $52 million deal. Dwayne Dedmon, a 3-year, $40 million deal to go to Sacramento. Terry Rozier in a sign and trade, a 3-year, $58 million deal in Charlotte. Rudy Gay, 2-year, $32 million deal in San Antonio. Chris Middleton, a 5-year, $178 million deal in Milwaukee. Nikola Mirotic goes back to Europe. J.J. Redick, 2-year, $26.5 million deal with the Pelicans. Thaddeus Young goes to the Bulls. Derrick Rose goes to the Pistons. 3-year, $45 million deal for Jonas Valanciunas. Kristaps Porzingis, 5-year, $158. Who's still out there? So right now, Kawhi Leonard, Jimmy Butler, D'Angelo Russell, Al Horford is still out there. Tobias Harris is still out there. Bojan Bogdanovic is out there. DeMarcus Cousins is still out there. Malcolm Brogdon still out there. Julius Randle is out there, and J.J. Redick is now off the list. So we will see what else comes down and see let's see. Let's see, there was just some report here about the Pelicans. Etuan Moore becomes available on the Pelicans, by the way. I've always liked him an awful lot. If J.J. Redick is there, I would guess they probably want that. All right, let me go to the questions. If the Lakers and Pelicans both make the playoffs, who are the two teams that drop out? San Antonio feels like, but they get DeJounte Murray back off his ACL. Who knows where the Clippers are at this point, whether they can run that back entirely depending on who they sign or don't sign. So I don't know who the two teams are. So far. Someone's telling me I'm pronouncing it's Bojan Bogdanovic is the better way to pronounce it. Okay. Or the correct way to pronounce it, Bogdanovic. I'll see what I see. Let me give you a little bit on Bogdanovic, who he is as a player, which makes him interesting. Over the last 4 years, he's a 41%. Over the last 3 years and 919 attempts, he is a 41% three-point catch and shooter guy. He's 36% off the bounce, which is an elite level. That's very, very high. He's 86th percentile in the pick and roll as the ball handler last year. 78th the year before that. 72nd is the year before that. So those are the positives. It would be a ball handling small four wing. Jazz would probably have to start Royce O'Neal maybe at your 4 or figure out who their 4 is at that point. He is not a good rebounder. He is a 13% defensive rebounder, which is very, very low defensive rebounder, so that would be the concern there. The latest news, no one's quite sure how it impacts things, is that Thaddeus Young has left Indiana to sign with Chicago. That would lead one to believe that Indiana's willing to up the offer. Is it possible that Bojan Bogdanovic wants to just stay in Utah or come to Utah to play under Quinn Snyder, play in this system, play with the ball in his hands in a way that's different than what he had in Philadelphia? What he had in Indiana. That would be what you're kind of holding out hope for here at this point, to see what happens. So it will be interesting to see. No word has come down as of yet. Tony Jones reported that they are meeting today. We'll see how that is. So Michael Johns wants to know, are the Jazz talking to Bojan anytime soon? And the answer is yes. All reports are that the Jazz are talking to him at some point soon here. So things have slowed down. Kevin Durant announces himself that he is heading to Brooklyn. Terry Rozier's contract is an eye-opener. 3-year, $58 million. And what is Boston doing with all these sign-in trades is a huge part of it. We have not heard anything from Kawhi Leonard, which is probably no big surprise. And Milwaukee has re-signed Lopez and Middleton. So now the question is, does somebody give Malcolm Brogdon a massive offer and make it so Milwaukee decides not to match and move that far along? So we'll see what's going on with that. All right, let me get back to the chat room here and see what everybody's saying. I don't think, is there a risk of dealing Ingles? Jeremy Lamb has emerged as a serious free agent target for the Pacers, in addition to Indiana's long-running interest in Ricky Rubio, according to Mark Stein. So then that makes you wonder, do they think they're replacing someone? I think that, the one thing on Bojan, I think he lets Ingles kind of what we've asked out of Ingles, 82 games, 30 minutes a night, I think is too much. And I think it allows Ingles to have some position in which he can have success for a longer period of time and be able to not wear down. I thought there were times last year, now the whole thing with Jacob and the autism, so it's hard to tell, but it felt like at times that maybe he was slowing down. And I've been very nervous about Ingles and just in general believe this about Ingles is a better athlete than we realize. He's 6'8". He's particularly lengthy for that position. He does things most players don't do. So there's a lot of things there that when we talk about him as a not good athlete, I think is a little bit of a misnomer. But I think one of the things for Ingles that is important is that when he ages, I think it could go badly. Players who are not elite athletes, when they slip athletically, Mehmet Okur is a good example. It's just over. Carlos Boozer, it's just over. And that is a concern for me for the Jazz in Ingles, is that I think when he does age, it will happen very quickly. Now, when he ages, since his path to the NBA is so different, I don't know, and he's done a better job of keeping track of his body. So I'm not sure what the answer on that is. Terrence Ross has agreed to a 4-year, $54 million deal in Orlando. So Ross and Vukovic stay in Orlando, a 4-year, $54 million deal for Terrence Ross. The Jeremy Lamb to Indiana is interesting if Indiana suddenly feels like they have lost Bojan and whether they maybe just don't want to pay him what he may have earned coming off this last season. This was the best year of his career, so I think that's a little bit of a question. Is it possible to have Portis and Bogdanovich sign the two small deals instead of paying Bojan? No, not a chance at all. Well, we're just trying to sign a free agent. That would be a big step for the Jazz to sign a free agent. But they have not been able to get a free agent to come here. But you're not going to get them to come on a smaller deal. Bojanovic or Favors? What is a better fit? Says Big H. I think this is what the front office is deciding. We've run it out there with Favors. We've done it. What this would do would open up the floor. Donovan's numbers when he's on the floor with Favors and with Gobert, if my members correctly, is not great. And so I think that you're opening up a deal, you're opening up the floor, you're opening up opportunities for Conley to play downhill with Gobert and 3 shooters on a pick and roll. You're opening up a floor for Donovan to play downhill with Gobert on the pick and roll. You're going to have to find another rolling big if you can somewhere. I mean, Rashawn Holmes might be that backup. That's a decent rolling big there who was in Phoenix last year and be able to play. And you're always spread with 4 shooters. When Rudy's been on the floor with 4 shooters, we have been really, really good. And I think that is the advantage of Bojan. And you have Bojan Bogdanovic on the pick and roll with Rudy having a power forward and a 5 trying to figure out how to deal with it while flipping it up to Rudy on a lob or kicking out to Conley, Donovan, or Ingles or Royce as shooters. There's a lot to that. To see, Pacers have $21 million in space with Bogdanovic's hold. Rumors are Rubio takes up 15. Without Bogdanovic, they can get over 30. So if they're trying to sign Jeremy Lamb and Ricky Rubio, they cannot sign Jeremy Lamb, Ricky Rubio, and Bogdanovic. Nate Duncan with that note on Twitter. So we'll see how that plays out. Now with Favors, you have an elite defensive team. You have the best backup center in the NBA. But the downside is you're paying $18 million for a player who doesn't really fit in your starting lineup great with Gobert. We're the only team in the NBA that's been playing 2 bigs that have no passing skills, no dribbling skills, and no shooting skills. That's a pretty big deal. Trevor Ariza has signed a 2-year, $25 million deal with the Kings. Where's Al Horford going? That's a huge question. Trevor Ariza, 2-year, $25 million deal with the Sacramento Kings. There's a lot of money being flown out right now. I think the difference between Trevor Ariza and the wing player people are going to be able to get for a low number, I think is I think that's going to be where the wins are in this. Garrett Temple, 2-year, $10 million deal is a really good deal for Brooklyn. I like Garrett Temple an awful lot. But depth pieces are certainly going away very quickly right now in the NBA. Terry Rozier, 3-year, $58 million deal is finally official. Let me see if I can get to the questions over here. I do love Faves, one of my all-time Jazz favorites, regardless of what happens with them. I think we all love Faves. I mean, I think that's the most clear thing. And thanks so much for everyone tuning in. Great numbers right now. I just kind of stunned by how many people are watching this. If we land Bogdanovich and drop Favors, what do we do then, says Colton? Well, I think then you're trying to find a backup point guard that can play. He's kind of your second and third backup point guard. You have to find a backup center who can give you 12 or 14 minutes a night. Is that, I mentioned Rashawn Holmes. I've mentioned Ed Davis. I've mentioned Robin Lopez has always been a guy I've been a fan of. Mike Muscala, Noah Vonleh, Kem Birch, Ivan Rabb. They're not names that are going to move your meter, but they're going to get they're going to get the job done. The way Kayvon Looney did along the way, and some of these other players. The best teams often do this, and then you got to find some wing depth. You've got to find some wing depth, and that's going to be the most difficult. There's just not a lot of wing depth out there right now, and you probably need a backup four. I like Darius Miller, who's in New Orleans, Jeff Green, Wilson Chandler, Mike Scott, Dante Cunningham. I've always liked JaMychal Green. Damari Carroll's floating out there, but there's not much. Reggie Bullock, Alec Burks, Rodney Hood, Amon Shumpert, James Ennis, Jake Layman. There's not a lot of wing. The wing depth to me is a little bit more worrisome than some of these other things, because I just am not sure how many guys out there. Willie Green as a backup center is being mentioned. Yeah, he was great in the G League last year. I think you give him Jeff Nelson. He liked Rabb a lot coming out of Cali. Got better last year. Ivan Rabb had a decent year last year in Memphis, very quietly. Frank Kaminsky is not defensively minded enough for me, but he can shoot it. So we'll see how that plays out. How much better are the Kings now with Dwayne Dedmon instead of Willie Cauley-Stein and Trevor Ariza as some bench depth? I'm not sure that's Damari Carroll's a fan favorite. You know what? As a backup, not bad. Does Thabo Sefolosha come back? There's just a lot of different options out there. Bobby Marks did a really nice job on his free agency primer, if you want to check that out. It's got every single free agent that's out there and available and all the depth charts for it. And it's a pretty good one to keep an eye on with all these things. Sorry, I'm just kind of fiddling around here and getting back to do we have the mid-level if we sign Bojan? I don't think so, unless we do some interesting things on the Conley deal to get under the cap. Is it true that Horford's wife wants to live in Salt Lake? Any chance the Jazz looking in with Faves out? And I have not heard that. We are a 60-win team with Bojan Bogdanovich. I'm not sure I totally agree with that, but it's an interesting. Bogdanovich was terrific on my points gained. So was Favors, though. Let's remember that. Tony Bradley's 20 years old and could still pan out. Right. He was a point guard until late in his career, still learning skills, working very hard with Vince LaGarza on the staff, doing a great job with that. Do you think that the Nets are better with Kevin Durant? Well, not this. He's not playing this year. So, it's interesting to see whether the Nets are even an Eastern Conference home team for the next year. And Al Farouk Aminu signs a 3-year, $29 million deal in Orlando. 3-year, $29 million deal for Aminu in Orlando coming across right there. He is really one of the least good point guard or shooting fours in the NBA. In fact, he was behind Jay Crowder as the worst shooting four in the NBA. Very good defensively, does a lot of things. But it's interesting to me, what is Orlando doing with Aaron Gordon? What is Orlando doing with Jonathan Isaac? What is Orlando doing with Mo Bamba? Is there a play to be made for Aaron Gordon here out of nowhere? Indiana and Ricky Rubio are in advanced talks on a deal, according to Tony Jones. Hope Ricky gets his money. I actually thought there was a decent chance Ricky would end up in Barcelona. I really did. I thought there was a chance Ricky would not get a starting job in the NBA this year and end up in Barcelona. Um, Orlando is interesting. Orlando signing Aminu. They just have a lot of players. Are you excited about the Summer League? Which of the 3 picks getting playing time next year? I don't know much about these 3 picks at all. I will be there tomorrow. We'll be doing NBA TV Live and KJS TV Live, so we'll keep an eye on that. But I do not know a great deal. Is Tony Bradley even being close to contribute in the NBA? I think he's relatively close. How do you like Aaron Gordon? I've always liked Aaron Gordon a great deal because of I think he can play with the ball in his hands and play pick and roll. I love 3s and 4s that can play pick and roll and force 3s and 4s that aren't used to guarding the pick and roll to play in the pick and roll. And so I'm a big fan of those types of players. That's my kind of my feeling and my thought on Aaron Gordon is if he can do that, his shooting is only okay. It's improved a little bit, and then every year it starts and then drops as the year goes on. And I just wonder, I think there's a question of kind of what's his role and how he's going to play and what his situation is. The interesting thing I'm bringing back Rodney Hood is he'd be perfect. The question is whether he's willing to come back to Utah to be an off-the-bench guy, right? So I think that's an interesting he'd be great. Like, you need a wing player. I just don't think he's coming back for the role he'd have here. What is JaMychal Green's market like? I don't know, but if it stays low, he's a guy I would love as a backup 4. He knows Conley well. He understands. He plays. He's a pretty decent shooter. He's a very good athlete. He has not come out very well defensively on a bunch of numbers, which I was a little bit surprised by. So I was a little surprised by seeing that. The Locked On shows are going to be incredible tomorrow to see what everyone's reactions on these are as the various deals come in. From Instagram, what do you think the Jazz is a championship? Do you think the Jazz are a championship team with Mike Conley? I got to know where everybody else is and other teams are and who signs where else before. But, right now, as we sit right now, with the Lakers having not added Kawhi Leonard or something crazy, the Jazz are as good as any team in the Western Conference right now. They're probably right up there with Houston if Houston holds it together. We don't know where Jimmy Butler's going. We don't know where Kawhi Leonard's going. It's probably too hard to answer that. Could the Jazz sign Bogdanovich and also trade for Kevin Love? No. I don't think you could get all those things done. Is the Dante Exum experiment over? No, I don't think so at all. In fact, I think the Jazz are hoping that Dante's able to come back. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't play a little 2 or 3 this year. More so than some other positions than what he's played. I think that's I think you're going to see him off the ball more, and you'll see a backup point guard sign, let Dante kind of play the wing, weak side wing. I think that's a pretty good play. If Bogdanovich doesn't sign here, is there another player that fits points gained at the 4 spot available? No. Bogdanovich is pretty good. The next player that you're looking at as a 4 that hasn't signed is Marcus Morris. I really do. I really think if Bogdanovich doesn't sign, the Jazz are bringing back Favors. The Jazz have put themselves. It might be hard for Favors to swallow that after watching all this going on, but the Jazz put themselves in this position on purpose so they could do exactly this and be able to look at the various opportunities they have, and then if they don't see something that they like, they go back to Favors and they play it the way they do, and then they got to go find whatever that backup 4 is, that stretch 4, which might be Royce O'Neal, right? Your second unit might just become Royce O'Neal playing with Joe Ingles. Nikola Mirotic was on the Jazz radar, according to all reports that are out there, and so you would certainly think that they're trying to find a way to open up the floor, spread the floor for Conley, spread the floor for Donovan Mitchell, and let Rudy Gobert roll to the bat. Rudy's numbers when Derek's off the floor are way better also. So you're trying to open up some things offensively, and that's what these quests has been. But if you can't get those things done, then you end up bringing back Derek, and you're an elite defensive team, and you've got to figure out how you're playing, what your backup four is, who can spread the floor, and what your backup point guard is. Daniel House signs a 3-year, $11 million deal to return to the Houston Rockets. On that. Jazz starting Conley, Mitchell, O'Neal. Well, no. We got Tobias Harris. It would be mammoth. Word out of Milwaukee from one of their beat writers that the Bucks are working on a sign and trade with Malcolm Brogdon. Philly has been talked about a lot there. We'll see whether it happens there. There is be interesting to see whether or not that means Jimmy Butler's gone. We'll see of what takes place and how the J.J. Redick leaving to go to New Orleans impacts Jimmy Butler along the way. All right, let's get to some of your other questions. Do you think the Jazz re-sign Kyle Korver? Well, he's currently a member of the Memphis Grizzlies, and they have to make a decision on him. Then Korver, I would suspect, goes to L.A. And plays with LeBron. He's done it before. He understands it. He liked it. He thought LeBron was incredible. He spoke glowingly of it, so I would expect it. If that's what he plans, if that's what his plan to do. Is Tobias Harris, no word yet on him. Tad Olson wanted to know Bogdanovich is a unrestricted free agent. So we'll see what that. My reaction to Kevin Durant signing. I mean, I think it's a big deal that he left the Warriors, but I actually think the Warriors dodged a bullet today in the sense that they were about to sign 2 injured players to 5-year deals, and I just don't think that was a good script, and I don't think Kevin Durant's coming back as Kevin Durant. So I think I'm not sure I think this is as great a signing by Brooklyn as everyone else does, I guess. That Achilles injury is real, and Kevin Durant, will be interesting to see what Kevin Durant comes back and does. Another report out of Milwaukee. Chris Middleton, Brook Lopez, and George Hill all returning to the Bucks, and Malcolm Brogdon probably on his way out. Is some of the word there. We'll see where Brogdon ends up. That will be an interesting little note. Could we trade Favors, Exum, and renounce all others for Harris? It gets complicated. You need a third team. There's a base level in there as well. Ricky Rubio has agreed to a 3-year, $51 million deal with the Phoenix Suns. Well, that is not good for the Utah Jazz. So Rubio signs a 3-year, $51 million deal with the Phoenix Suns. So how does that impact Indiana? $51 million for Rubio. Holy smokes. Jeremy Lamb has signed a 3-year, $31 million deal to the Indiana Pacers. So who's Indiana? And Bojan Bogdanović has agreed to a 4-year, $73 million deal with the Utah Jazz. According to Woj, Bojan Bogdanović has agreed to a 4-year, $73 million deal with the Utah Jazz. Wow. We just got really interesting. And Malcolm Brogdon is the new point guard in Indiana. Wow, it all just came flying down. Bojan Bogdanović has agreed to a 4-year, $73 million deal with the Utah Jazz. So 4 years, 73 is a little under the number that I think we were at 18.5. We'll have to let Dan Clayton or someone who can do this off the top. But 17.5 for your third scorer or second or third scorer is pretty good. So what just happened there? Rubio, $51 million to Phoenix. Brogdon ends up going to Indiana. And Bojan Bogdanovic signs a 4-year, $73 million deal with the Utah Jazz. And let me just take a second. Derek Favors has been the best and is just an unbelievably great dude who it's been so fun to cover and follow and be a part of and watch. And he may end up in New Orleans or at this point on a really good basketball team and be a beast. But I do think the Jazz have now built an offensive basketball team that's going to be super, super interesting. I mean, that is super, super interesting. Let's get your reactions. So thanks to Faves. I mean, he's just been amazing. Thanks to Ricky Rubio. Both of them took the Jazz to important places over the last few years and were key, integral parts of it. Rubio with the triple-double against OKC. Favors with all of his clutch moments in the playoffs in both those last two series. And now the Jazz will have 4 guys on the floor with Ingles, Bogdanovic, Conley, and Mitchell, who can all run the pick and roll and can all do a lot of different things and can all shoot it. Wow. The Jazz have just become a very, very different offensive basketball team. I'll tell you what, I was pro Bogdanovic over Mirotic this whole time. The feeling that I had is he just does more things. Now, how we rebound is going to be a really big question mark on this. But this is a interesting piece to the puzzle. And the Jazz have transformed dramatically who they are. And the Jazz are relying on the Defensive Player of the Year to carry them defensively. And I think the question has been whether or not the Jazz are going to be able to find players that match Donovan and match Rudy, and they've done that. They've relieved the ball handling burden on Donovan. They've spread the floor for the pick and roll, and this is a good offensive basketball team. I don't know who you're not, and this league is important offensively. And the concern over the last 2 years for me on the Jazz has simply been, as great as they are defensively, even if they had a good defensive day, their offense was not able to catch up even when their defense was good. Wow, what a day of free agency. Indiana has signed Jeremy Lamb, Ricky Rubio to Phoenix, and Bojan Bogdanovic signs with the Utah Jazz. Let me go to an article that was written by earlier this year that talked about Bogdanovic as a playoff player. Bogdanovic. Let's see. In a league that is more shooting threes by the day, the Patriots, let's see. Bogdanovic's velvet smooth threes are his calling card, but he's far more than just a spot-up shooter. Watch him roam the perimeter, and you'll see that he has a keen eye for when to scissor through the defense. He's fully capable of shredding opponents off the dribble by finding the open man or getting to the rim himself. His off-ball cutting is often ingenious. His playmaking and back-to-the-basket postgame is a pleasant surprise. Though he can't fill the Oladipo-sized void in his team's offense, his compensated for a good chunk of it. Bogdanovic may not be as difficult to track as J.J. Redick, but he's far more complex to guard when it comes to his combination of size, shooting, and vision. He only averages 1.9 assists per game, but his skill beyond the arc and his threat of dribble drive passes puts defenders on tilt. On defense, Bogdanovic is often tasked with guarding the opposing team's players. His 6'8", 216-pound frame helps him hold his own down low and on the outside as well. Here's what his teammates said about him. Thaddeus Young said, from day one, he's a guy who's been intrigued. Last year, he did a lot for us. He guarded some of the best guys on the court and made a lot of three balls. I know he stays to himself, says Darren Collison, but I'm glad he's getting attention. He deserves it. The thing with Bogey is he doesn't care, and I'll say that in a good way. He's a bit of a loner, but he's okay because I'm a loner too, said Bill Bano. Sometimes I see him in downtown Indianapolis Whole Foods, and he's usually by himself. Nate McMillan said he's one of those guys I have to say woohoo to. He just keeps showing growth in his game because we're using him differently, and now we're depending on him more. The Jazz have signed Bojan Bogdanovic. Thomas Bryant has agreed to a 3-year deal with the Washington Wizards. Give me 1 second. Let me tweet out that we are live. Special edition of Locked On Jazz is live right now. Twitter at Locked. Actually, you know what? Let me do it. Let me do it here. Thank you guys for your patience. All right, let's see. Give me 1 second. Sorry. We'll get your reactions here in a second. All right. Hopefully those went out. Don't know if they did. So, update you. The Utah Jazz have just signed Bojan Bogdanovic for a 4-year, $70+ million deal, according to the reports with from Adrian Wojnarowski. The Jazz now suddenly. Here are some of the reports. Utah's reactions from Hardwood. Matt Miller or Matt Moore from Action Sports. Utah's miles closer to the West title now than they were last year. The Lakers get Kawhi. It's still them, obviously, but the Jazz got so much better. From Jared Dubin, the Jazz are having my favorite, not best, just my favorite offseason. Conley and Bojan make them so much better and more fun. So the Jazz move Mike Conley in exchange for Ricky Rubio. They lose Jay Crowder. Derek Favors will move on. And we thank him for everything. He's simply the best. But the Jazz have signed Bojan Bogdanovic to a 4-year deal. He brings in a guy who over the last 3 years has shot from 3-point average 40 or a catch and shoot threes at 41%, off the bounce at 36%. He is a 86th percentile pick and roll player last year, 78th pick and roll player the year before, and 72nd the year before that. He gives the Jazz another elite level pick and roll player to use in their offense. Something that they with Ingles, with Donovan, is an incredible element. Once Woj tweets out, once Nikola Mirotic made a surprising decision to return to Europe, new Jazz general manager Justin Zanuck pivoted and made a strong push to sign Bogdanovic. In the first few months as GM, Zanuck has landed Mike Conley and Bogdanovic. Jazz are a legit Western Conference contender. Sitting right now, you can make the argument we might be the favorite. Kind of crazy. Last year on a pick and roll, Bogdanovic ran 438 pick and rolls last year with Miles Turney was a .88 points per chance. With Sabonis, he was a .91, and with Thaddeus Young, he was a .93. So a lot of versatility, runs them in different fashions. We are the number one team in the league in drives. So let's take a look at his drive game and what he's able to do there. Sorry, looking things up as on the fly here as this all is breaking as we speak, and then I want to get your guys' reaction. Obviously hard to say goodbye to Faves, but this is a dramatic change. He had 588 drives last year at 1.06 point per drive. So 1.06. Let's put this into the leading drive guys in the NBA last year. If we take the top 100 players in the NBA with drives, so those who had at least 400 drives last year, 1.06 would put Bogdanovich at the 25th best drive guy in the league. Rubio is right there as well. But boy, Conley, Mitchell, Royce or Ingles, whichever you want is your other starter, with Bogdanovich, with Rudy Gobert. We're stretching it. We're going to put Rudy Gobert in a position to be the defensive player of the year with his ability to defend. We're going to probably switch 1 through 4 defensively and run him into Gobert. And now the question is, who can the Jazz get as a backup center? We mentioned some of those names. Who can they get as a backup point guard? We've mentioned some of those names. When you now have Mike Conley at 30, Donovan, Joe Ingles at 18, Bogdanovich at 18, Rudy Gobert at 30, you're going to have minimum players around and working on this as part of your rotation and find things. Let's get some of the reaction. Christy says we'll miss Favors. No question. We'll be able to keep Favors. No, we will not be able to keep Favors. How does the money work? It feels like it's a little low for what I thought the Jazz would be able to offer. So the Jazz, I think there's $1 million here that matters a little bit. And I don't know what the impact of it's going to be, but I think there's something there. You take a second here and think about the Jazz, a team that got the most. This is the question we've all been asking: is what the Jazz got more open looks than anyone in the league? Did they get them because of the fact that nobody wanted to guard any of our guys, or was it because we have the best offense, we just didn't make shots? I just got a text from a play-by-play announcer in the NBA who said, your May and June just got a lot busier. Good for you. So people around the league reacting to the Jazz signing. You've got now Mike Conley, career 38% three-point shooter. On Donovan Mitchell will play with so much more space and room, a career 35% three-point shooter. The Jazz signing Bojan Bogdanovich. Bogdanovich, a career 39% three-point shooter. In the last 3 years, he's 39, 40, and 43. And Joe Ingles on the floor as a career, and the recruiter, 41% three-point shooter. That is something else, people. I mean, that is a big-time collection of talent. Stunning move. All right, I want to see if I've been trying to keep on the chat room. Let me see what I get your guys' reactions now. Appreciate it. We've got nearly 2,000 people live with us right now. It's just incredibly incredible. Throw me if you've already given the reaction on the chat room. Give it to me again. I want to see. Very thankful for Faves. Dude was nothing but class from day one. Jazz saw an opportunity, and they took it. Happy to see the aggression from Jazz Brass compared to the gun-shy KOC days. Let's go, Utah. Give Dennis Lindsey some credit here. He signed a contract a year ago with Faves, which that second year was a July. It was a 6th of July guarantee date, and that allowed the Jazz to do this. Ben says, JaMychal Green, Reggie Bullock, please. You know what? If you're an NBA player, you're suddenly looking at the Jazz, and you may be interested to go here. Backup center, I think is it Robin Lopez? Is it Rashawn Holmes? Is it Ed Davis? It's going to be one of those kind of things. Definitely coming back as your intern. Glad to hear it. I like it. Andrew's back. I think that was Andrew. one of our best broadcast assistants we've ever had, has announced his free agent signing back to the team. All right. Heard an audible scream outside. Comments are coming in from everywhere. The Jazz have signed a 4-year contract to Bojan Bogdanovic. Our Instagram Live is going to go away here in about 10 seconds. We've been on too long. So thank you to everyone who tuned in to Instagram. We'll see what... appreciate you tuning in. We're over 10,000 followers, so we'll be able to do a bunch of stuff for you. Appreciate it very much. Thanks to everybody who tuned in on that. We're back here live on this feed as the Jazz make their move. I like Robin Lopez as a backup too. Give me your thoughts. Everybody feel your thoughts. I want to hear what you guys have to say about things. We'll continue to watch as deals come in. But the story is the Jazz have signed Bojan Bogdanovic to a new deal. Rodney Hood has signed a 2-year, $16 million deal to return to the Portland Trailblazers. Good for Rodney. Ryan Russillo tweets out, I love the Jazz. So the Jazz making big news and are suddenly an offensive juggernaut after not being able to score for some time now with a floor spread of 40% three-point shooters. How they rebound, whether the defense is as good, will be the questions coming into camp, and offense will not for the first time. Stunning. We'll review everything in a second. Any more big moves for the Jazz? I love it. We got Mike Conley as a point guard. And we got a Bojan Bogdanovic, and we want more. Andy Larson tweets out a $73 million deal with 5% raises throughout will start at $17 million next season. Royce Young tweets out excellent moves by the Jazz. As things stand right now, they're probably the Western Conference favorite. The reaction across the NBA to the Jazz move today is significant. Wow. Good luck to FaZe. Pelicans might be scary if he signs there. Would Utah explore trading Exum to clear space for more role players? At $11 million, you hope Exum is able to be the guy. I mean, you've got your starting lineup's going to play a lot. Now you're going to have to manage Mike Conley because he's older, but you got Mike Conley. You've got I think you could start Royce. Frankly, you got Bojan, you've got Donovan, and you got Rudy. You're going to need a backup center. You've got Tony Bradley on the roster that maybe is ready, but you'd like to get something else there. You need a backup 4. I think you have Exum as your backup 2-3 with Ingles, and you need a backup 1. So you got 3 more roster spots, likely coming in at low numbers. The Jazz have a room exception that could be used on a power forward. Tony Jones mentions Jeff Green. I would go JaMychal Green instead of that, and see how it goes. We are favorites until Kawhi goes to Clippers. We're actually favorites until Kawhi goes to the Lakers. Frankly. If Kawhi goes to Clippers, I think we might still be favorites. Indiana losing Bogdanovic is bad, but Pacers knew they were likely not to be able to re-sign him. That's why they got TJ Warren from Phoenix on draft night, added Brogdon and Jeremy Lamb, says David Aldridge. Tim Reynolds, $73 million for Bogdanovic, hashtag nice. George Niang. Absolutely. I forgot my main guy, George Niang, when I just did that. Great point. Thank you. I don't like Stanley Johnson. He has not shown the ability to really put it together just because he's an early draft pick. Do like Emmanuel Mudiay, though. Like, if Emmanuel Mudiay became available, I would go sign him to a 2-year deal at a low number and see if you could turn him into something. No, Julius Randle is probably not. Will Bobby Portis take? We don't have less to offer. Like, will Bobby Portis take $2 million to come here? No, I don't think so. More reaction to the Jazz signing as a Ben Anderson tweets out Donovan Mitchell is the worst perimeter shooter in the Jazz starting lineup at 36%. I mean, all of a sudden, guarding the Jazz is going to be brutal. And that's what we just ran through a second ago. The Jazz have pounced on a wide-open Western Conference and built an offensive team with the best defensive player in the world. Wow. if I got Bogdanovich and Archie Diacono on the same team and have to pronounce them both, I might die. But I like Ryan Archie Diacono out of Chicago. He's a restricted free agent though, so I don't know whether or not you can get him an offer. But I like him as a backup point guard. I like Shabazz Napier as a backup point guard. You're not trying to be great at these points. Someone just said Boogie signed for $5 million. I have not seen that. I just got a tweet from another play-by-play announcer that said to me, I'm going to quote him from Tim Roy of the Warriors, just tweeted me, I'll brief you on what to expect in June. How's that for a reaction? 4-year, $73 million deal and the Jazz are interesting. They are small. They do not have a true power forward. They've gone from being massive to being wide open and small. And they have a head coach who's going to be able to work masters with this lineup and what he has. It's going to be insane. The Jazz are going to be one of the lead teams in the Western Conference. Portland's pretty darn good. Denver's now lead team is like you're 2 games better than everybody else. Right? We're not running away with this thing. Don't go get too crazy and excited here. But Gobert's going to have a mammoth year rebounding. Thanks to the guy who checked in on Twitch and said hello. And Donovan and Conley and Bogdanovich and Ingles and Royce are going to have driving lanes. I think Royce might be the one who profits the most off this because Royce playing on the backside, driving the basket. Dante playing on the backside, driving the basket off this action is going to be really powerful stuff. So if you look at the Jazz roster, Conley, Mitchell, Royce, Bojan Bogdanovic, Rudy Gobert, Dante Exum, Joe Ingles, George Niang. You need a backup center. You might need a backup point, or you just take a wing player and let Ingles and Exum and play a group of that and play Donovan in some of those minutes. I think you might bring Ingles off the bench and let Royce guard their best defensive player, and let Joe play with the ball in his hands a lot as that pick and roll guy. Now, he's lost his pick and roll buddy in Derek Favors, but he was pretty good with Rudy, and the Jazz are going to need to find another big who can run the pick and roll so they can be 4 wide and having the big roll the middle all game long. All right, let me recap where we are on everything. The Jazz, big move. They have signed Bojan Bogdanovic for a 4-year, $72 million deal, and the Utah Jazz have now just got an offensive team of incredible shooting. Bogdanovic, if you don't know him well, he was in Indiana last year. Before that, he was in Brooklyn and Milwaukee, or Brooklyn and Washington. He's 30 years old. He started 80 games in 81 games each of the last 2 years, averaged 18 points a game, 4 rebounds, 2 assists last year, shot 43% from 3. Over the last 3 seasons, he's shot 41% from 3 on catch and shoot, 36% off the bounce. He also plays well with the ball in his hands. He was in the 86th percentile in pick and roll with the ball in his hands. Last year, 78th the year before that, and 72nd the year before that. He is 6'8", 216 pounds. So the Jazz now are a much smaller team. He's really generally played the small forward, but can play some power forward. He is not a good rebounder, so one of the big questions for the Jazz will be how they rebound next year and whether they can be elite defensively without Derek Favors. Rudy Gobert has shown they could be with Jay Crowder. Jay Crowder was a very poor rebounder as well, though, so I'm not sure that's a problem. But Bogdanovic also is a 85% free throw shooter, and so the Jazz will now play with an incredibly spread floor, with a great offensive team. And Dan Clayton has just tweeted out, if Bojan's starting salary is $17 million flat, the Jazz don't have to waive Neto to compete the deal. So now you suddenly have Raul Neto, who is a perfectly acceptable backup point guard if he can stay healthy. And that's the exact type of player you're going to get when you suddenly have a marquee starting lineup. The possibility of a 3-team trade is dead. Brooklyn is not incentivized to do it between Boston, Charlotte, and Brooklyn. Derek Favors will be waived. Somebody can just pick him up off waivers. It's a pretty good one-year deal for someone if they want to do that, by the way. We'll see where he ends up. He could end up in New Orleans. He could end up some other place. New Orleans does have money for him. Backup center, we've talked about some names. Robin Lopez, Rashawn Holmes, Ed Davis. Ed Davis, an offensive rebounding juggernaut, could bring that portion back to the Jazz. That'd be a nice pickup. Ed Davis generally is thought of as like the best backup center in the league. Robin Lopez. Dwayne Dedman signed a big deal today, much more than people anticipated. Kyle O'Quinn's a decent player. Noah Vonleh had a good year. Kem Birch, I don't know if he'll be available by Charlotte, but he's out there. Ivan Rabb is a pretty darn good player that could. These are the type of guys you're going to see now in the next few days as things play out. Kawhi Leonard, no word on him yet. Jimmy Butler, no word on him as of this moment. Tobias Harris, no word there. Al Horford, no word. Brogdon is off the board. Julius Randle, no word on that J.J. Redick signed in New Orleans to see. So the Jazz have made their move here. Let's get some more of your reaction. Do the Lakers pick up Faves if they can't pick up a third max player? Possibly. Could be a good pickup for them, but that'd be good news for the Jazz, frankly, if Favors is over there. Not because of anything wrong with Derek, because it means simply that the Jazz would not have Kawhi Leonard. If Kawhi Leonard stays in Toronto, the Jazz are the favorite in the Western Conference right now. That's the crazy thing here. No, we do not want DeMarcus Cousins for 1 year. I don't think we want JaVale McGee either. We'll see what other reactions are coming in here. I've gotten 2 texts from NBA play-by-play announcers. One of them, the Warriors announcer, told me, I'll brief you on what to expect in June. Another one said, your May and June just got a lot busier. Good for you. So the Jazz have made some big moves. This is a big week for Tony Bradley in Summer League right now to show that he's ready to go. If you missed it, Ricky Rubio signed with the Suns, a 3-year, $51 million deal. Really happy for Ricky. I actually was concerned he was going to end up out without a starting job in the NBA, but he gets one there. And we'll see what happens. And we're glad to see that he got that. Tony Jones is tweeting out about the possibility of Ingles coming off. I think Ingles coming off the bench with Royce as a starter, not with them bringing in another power forward. But I don't think the Jazz will be able to get a starting power forward with the room exception. The Jazz, by the way, being able to do this without losing Neto and without losing Exum does give them some depth. And then you sign another minimum point guard here in the process and let he and Neto battle it out for that position and see what happens. Seth Curry's a restricted free agent, so I don't think that he could get away, but he'd be nice because he can play multiple positions and really stroke it. And the Jazz can really shoot it now. I like Darius Miller, by the way, as a 4 coming off the bench, who's out there as well. I've always liked him in New Orleans. I like Etuan Moore, who's a $10 million player who New Orleans may want to move. What do you think? Do you think the structure of Bojan's contract to create enough room to keep Neto? I'm sure that could be part of it. If he's starting at $17 million flat, that would be a part of it. Thanks so much for everybody's tuning in. The numbers have been great. Super appreciate you all grabbing. We're going to go for about another 2 minutes. Call it good. We've been on for over an hour, but super appreciate everybody. Any other final questions or thoughts, we can get it. But just to repeat the final details of the day, the big news story is Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving all go to the Nets with DeAndre Jordan and Garrett Temple. Kemba Walker goes to Boston. Terry Rozier signs a mammoth deal in Charlotte, 3-year, $58 million deal. We have not heard yet on Tobias Harris in Philadelphia. We've not heard yet about Jimmy Butler in Miami. And in the Western Conference, the Kings loaded up with a 4-year, $85 million deal for Harrison Barnes and a 3-year, $40 million deal for Dwayne Dedman and a 2-year deal for Trevor Ariza, while the Utah Jazz signed Bojan Bogdanovic for a 4-year, $71 million deal starting at around $17 million deal. Chris Vernon says, as things slow down for a second, finally process some of this. I know this for certain. Mike Conley gets you open looks, a lot of them. And with Donovan, Ingles, and Bojan, this could be serious. So the reactions coming in across the league. Here's Kevin O'Connor. The Jazz are the 2019-20 season NBA Finals dark horse with Conley and Bogdanovich joining Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, and Joe Ingles. They are a deep, versatile team that's far more potent on offense and will again be elite defensively. What a summer for the Utah Jazz. Justin Zanuck, the general manager in his first stint with still being led along with Dennis Lindsey and the crew. The Jazz able to act. And last season, let's close on this thought, and we'll talk about it more on Locked On Jazz tomorrow. Last year's offseason was kind of a funky one for the Jazz, and the question was, how do the Jazz react off it? And then the trade deadline, they did nothing. What do they do a year from now? There was really nothing to be done last trade deadline. And what are they going to be able to do with it this season? And they've done it. And they have made this move to put themselves at the elite of the Western Conference with an incredible shooting team. Mike Conley, 39% career three-point shooter. Ingles, 40. Bogdanovich is a career 39. And then Donovan Mitchell is your worst three-point shooter of your main guys. Royce O'Neal's shown he can knock it down as well. We're going to find out whether Quinn Snyder's offense got open looks because of the fact that nobody wanted to guard our guys, or whether Quinn Snyder's offense got open looks because of Quinn Snyder's offense. And if that's the case, the Jazz are going to be filthy. That wraps up our program today. Thanks very much for tuning in on all of our different formats. Special thanks to everyone in the big numbers along the way. Locked on Jazz will come to you tomorrow. Everyone in the big numbers along the way. Locked on Jazz. And thanks for all who've followed in all the various formats. Have a great night. Good time to be a Jazz fan. Talk to you soon.